I had been looking forward to this weekend for months. 3 whole days at my mother's house in Savannah, just me and her, catching up over sweet tea and her famous peach cobbler. Brandon had insisted I go. He said I needed the break, that I'd been working too hard at the marketing firm, and that he'd take care of everything at home while I was gone. Our house was in the middle of renovations anyway. We were finally getting that kitchen remodel I'd been dreaming about, and Brandon had hired his childhood friend Marcus to do the work. Marcus ran a small contracting business, and Brandon swore he'd give us a good deal. As I drove down I-16 toward Savannah that Friday morning, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The Georgia sun was bright, the music was good, and for the first time in forever, I didn't have to think about project deadlines or client meetings or construction dust. Brandon had kissed me goodbye that morning and promised to send me photos of the progress. Marcus was supposed to start on the cabinets while I was away. Mom was waiting on her porch when I pulled up, and the next 2 days were exactly what I needed. We talked, we laughed, we binged old movies, and she told me stories about Dad that made me miss him all over again. But by Sunday afternoon, I started feeling guilty. I'd barely checked in with Brandon. I'd sent him a few texts, and he'd replied with short messages saying everything was fine, that Marcus was doing great work, and that I should just relax and enjoy my time. That's when I remembered the security cameras. We'd installed them 6 months ago after someone broke into our neighbor's house. Brandon had been the one to push for it, saying he wanted me to feel safe when I was home alone. We had cameras on the front door, the back door, and one in the living room. I could check them all from an app on my phone. I was sitting on Mom's back porch, sipping lemonade, when I pulled out my phone and opened the app. I wasn't checking because I was worried. I was just curious. I wanted to see how the kitchen was coming along. Maybe I'd see Marcus working, or maybe I'd catch a glimpse of the new cabinets. The app loaded slowly, but when the feed finally appeared, my lemonade nearly slipped from my hands. The living room camera showed Brandon and Marcus, but they weren't working on the kitchen. They were standing in my living room, and they were carrying things. My things. Brandon had my grandmother's antique lamp in his hands, the one she'd left me when she passed. The one I'd told him 100 times was irreplaceable. Marcus was holding the vintage record player my father had given me for my 21st birthday. I watched, frozen, as they walked out of frame toward the front door. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What were they doing? Were they moving things to make space for the renovation? That didn't make sense. The kitchen was on the other side of the house. I rewound the footage. I went back an hour, then 2 hours. What I saw made my stomach turn. For the past 2 hours, Brandon and Marcus had been systematically removing items from our home. Not just any items, valuable items. My grandmother's lamp, my father's record player, the crystal vase we'd received as a wedding gift, the vintage typewriter I'd collected, the painting I'd bought at an art show in New Orleans. They were loading everything into Marcus's truck. I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My hands were shaking, my mind was racing. Why would Brandon be taking our things? Where was he taking them? And why was he doing it while I was away? I scrolled forward in the footage. 30 minutes ago, the two of them had come back into the living room, and this time they were talking. I couldn't hear what they were saying. The cameras didn't have audio, but I could see Brandon pointing at different items, and Marcus nodding. Then Brandon disappeared from view and came back with his laptop. He opened it on the coffee table, and both men leaned over it, looking at the screen. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Brandon was smiling. Not a normal smile, a satisfied smile. The kind of smile someone makes when they're getting away with something. I needed to hear what they were saying. I needed to understand what was happening. But the cameras didn't have audio, and I was 3 hours away in Savannah. I called Brandon. My finger was trembling as I pressed his name in my contacts. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, he picked up. "Hey, baby," he said, and his voice was so casual, so normal, that it made me want to scream. "Hey," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just wanted to check in. How's everything going?" "Everything's great," he said. "Marcus is making good progress. The old cabinets are out, and we're getting ready to install the new ones tomorrow." I looked at my phone screen, at the live feed of our living room. At that exact moment, I could see him standing there, phone to his ear, lying to my face. That's great, I said. My throat felt tight. Can you send me some pictures? I want to see how it looks. Sure, he said. I'll send some later. Marcus and I are about to grab some lunch. Okay, I said. Love you. Love you too. He hung up, and I sat there staring at the phone, watching as he and Marcus walked out of frame again. A few minutes later, I saw them come back carrying boxes. They were packing more items. I needed to get home. I needed to see what was happening with my own eyes. But I couldn't just leave without explaining to Mom, and I couldn't tell her the truth because I didn't even know what the truth was yet. Mom, I said, walking back into the house, I just got a call from work. There's an emergency with one of our clients. I have to head back. She looked disappointed but understanding. Oh, honey, I'm sorry. We didn't even get to finish the photo albums. I know. I'll come back soon, I promise. The drive back to Atlanta felt like the longest 3 hours of my life. My mind was spinning with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was Brandon selling our belongings? Was he in some kind of financial trouble he hadn't told me about? Was Marcus in on it, or was Brandon using him somehow? I tried to think back over the past few months, looking for signs I might have missed. Had Brandon been acting strange? Had there been any indication that something was wrong? Then I remembered something. About 2 months ago, I'd noticed that Brandon had been spending more time on his phone, always angling the screen away from me when I walked by. When I'd asked about it, he said he was just browsing sports news. And there had been that night, about 3 weeks ago, when I'd woken up at 2 in the morning and found him sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, papers spread everywhere. He'd quickly closed everything when he saw me and said he was working on taxes, even though it wasn't tax season. And the renovations. Brandon had been the one to suggest them, suddenly and urgently. He'd said we needed to do them now, that we'd been putting them off for too long. He'd insisted on hiring Marcus, on paying him in cash, on getting everything done quickly. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. What if this had been his plan all along? What if the renovations were just a cover for something else? When I finally pulled into our driveway at 7 that evening, Marcus's truck was gone, and Brandon's car was parked in its usual spot. The house looked normal from the outside, but my heart was racing as I walked up to the front door. I used my key to let myself in quietly. The house was silent. I could smell pizza, and I could hear the TV playing in the living room. "Brandon?" I called out, trying to sound normal. "Babe?" His voice came from the living room, surprised. "I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow?" I walked into the living room, and there he was, sitting on the couch in his sweatpants, a slice of pizza in his hand, watching a basketball game. He looked relaxed, comfortable, like he hadn't spent the entire day stealing from our home. "Work emergency got resolved faster than I thought," I said, setting my bag down. My eyes scanned the room. The record player was gone. The typewriter was gone. The painting was gone. So many things were just missing. "Oh," he said, and was it my imagination, or did he look nervous for just a second? "Well, welcome home. Want some pizza?" I looked around the room again, more obviously this time. "Where's Dad's record player?" He didn't miss a beat. "Oh, Marcus needed to move some stuff around to get to the walls for the kitchen work. Some of your things are in the garage for safekeeping. Didn't want them to get damaged by all the dust." "In the garage," I repeated. "Yeah. I should have texted you about it, but I didn't want to worry you. Everything's safe." I nodded slowly. "I'm going to go check." "Now?" he said. "You just got home. Don't you want to relax?" "I just want to make sure everything's okay," I said, walking toward the door that led to the garage. "Naya, seriously, everything's fine." But I was already opening the door, already flipping on the light. The garage was empty, completely empty. My car wasn't even parked inside because we'd been using the space for storage during the renovations. But now there was nothing. No boxes. No record player, no lamp, no typewriter, nothing. I turned around slowly. Brandon was standing in the doorway, and the expression on his face had changed. The casualness was gone. Now he just looked caught. "Where are my things, Brandon?" "I told you. They're safe. They're not in the garage." He opened his mouth, closed it. Marcus must have taken them to his storage unit. For extra protection, the dust from the renovation. "Stop lying to me." My voice came out harder than I intended. "I saw the security footage. I watched you and Marcus remove my belongings from this house. I watched you pack them into his truck. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Where are my things?" The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon's face went through several expressions: shock, panic, calculation, before finally settling on something that looked almost like resignation. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he always made when he was stressed. "I made some mistakes, Nia. Financial mistakes, bad investments. I owe some people money." My heart sank. "How much money?" $40,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. "40,000? Brandon, how?" "I thought I could make it back," he said quickly. "I had this opportunity, this investment that was supposed to be a sure thing. But it fell through, and now I owe this money, and I didn't know what else to do." "So you decided to sell my belongings? My grandmother's lamp? My father's record player? Without even asking me?" "I was going to tell you," he said, and he actually sounded sincere. "I just needed to handle it first. I didn't want you to worry. Once I pay off the debt, I'll buy everything back, I swear." I stared at him, this man I'd been married to for 5 years, and realized I was looking at a stranger. "Who did you sell them to?" He hesitated. "A collector. Marcus knows him. He gives good prices for vintage items. I want them back." "Nia, I can't. The money's already gone. I had to pay." "I don't care," I said, and my voice was shaking now, but not with fear, with anger. "Those items weren't yours to sell. That lamp was the only thing I had left from my grandmother. That record player was from my father. You had no right." I know. And I'm sorry. But what was I supposed to do? These people I owe money to, they're not the kind of people you can just ignore." "You could have talked to me," I was shouting now. "You could have told me the truth. We could have figured something out together. Instead, you lied to me. You sent me away so you could steal from our home, and you thought you could just get away with it." "I was trying to protect you." "Don't you dare," I said. "Don't you dare act like this was for me." I grabbed my purse and my keys. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To a hotel. I can't look at you right now." "Nia, please." But I was already walking out the door. I spent that night at a Holiday Inn, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Brandon's story had holes in it, big holes. For one thing, if he owed money to dangerous people, wouldn't he be more scared? He'd seemed nervous when I confronted him, sure, but not terrified, not like someone who was in real danger. And $40,000. That was a lot of money. But Brandon had a good job. He was a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm. If he'd really needed that much money for an emergency, couldn't he have taken out a loan? Borrowed from his parents? They weren't wealthy, but they would have helped their son if he was really in trouble. And why had he been smiling when I saw him on the camera? Why had he and Marcus been looking at his laptop together, pointing and nodding like they were planning something? The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go. I needed answers, real answers. I started by calling my friend Jessica. She was a private investigator. We'd met at a networking event 3 years ago, and we'd stayed in touch. I told her everything, and she agreed to help me. "First thing we need to do," she said, "is track where your items actually went. If Brandon sold them to a collector, there will be a paper trail. Second, we need to look into his finances. If he really has a $40,000 debt, it'll show up somewhere." Over the next week, I moved into a furnished apartment near work while Jessica dug into Brandon's life. What she found was worse than I could have imagined. Brandon didn't owe anyone $40,000. In fact, his finances were perfectly fine. He had savings, he had a good credit score, he hadn't made any large withdrawals or taken any loans. But he had done something else. 3 months ago, he'd opened an online seller account. Under a fake name, he'd been selling items. Lots of items. Not just my things, though those were included. He'd been selling items that belonged to both of us. Wedding gifts, furniture, even some of his own belongings. And the money wasn't going to pay off a debt. It was going into a separate bank account, an account that had almost $70,000 in it. "Nia," Jessica said, when she showed me the records, "I think your husband was planning to leave." The words didn't compute at first. Leave? Leave me? Look at this. She showed me a document on her laptop. 2 weeks ago, Brandon started looking at apartments in Charlotte, North Carolina. He put deposits down on 2 different places. He's been booking one-way flights. He's been researching divorce attorneys. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. He was going to divorce me? I think he was going to disappear, Jessica said gently. Take the money, move to Charlotte, and just vanish. This whole renovation thing with Marcus, I think that was cover, a way to explain why things were missing from the house. By the time you realized how much was actually gone, he'd be long gone. I couldn't breathe. But why? If he wanted to leave, why didn't he just leave? Why go through all this? Jessica pulled up more documents. Because of the prenup. I'd forgotten about the prenup. When Brandon and I got married, his parents had insisted on one. At the time, I'd been hurt, but I'd signed it anyway because I loved him and I thought we'd be together forever. The prenup stated that in the event of a divorce, we'd each keep what we came into the marriage with, plus half of anything we'd acquired together. If he divorced you legally, Jessica explained, he'd have to split everything fairly. The house, the savings, the investments. But if he just took what he could and disappeared, he'd keep it all. And with the renovations as cover, you might not even realize he'd stolen from you until it was too late to do anything about it. I sat there in Jessica's office, staring at the evidence of my husband's betrayal, and I felt something inside me shift. The hurt was still there, and so was the anger. But underneath it all was something else. Something cold and hard and determined. What can we do? I asked. Jessica smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We can get you justice. The first step was securing the evidence. Jessica helped me get copies of everything. The bank records, the seller account activity, the apartment applications, the flight bookings. We documented every item Brandon had sold, when he'd sold it, and for how much. Then we went after Marcus. Jessica tracked down the collector that Marcus claimed to know. Turns out, the collector was Marcus himself. He'd been buying the items from Brandon at far below market value, then reselling them online for huge profits. Marcus and Brandon were splitting the money. Jessica found messages between them, emails where they discussed which items to take next, how to price them, how to keep me from finding out. In one message, Brandon had written, "She'll never know. She trusts me completely." Reading that message felt like a knife to the chest. But we weren't done yet. Jessica discovered something else. The $40,000 debt Brandon had mentioned? It existed, but it wasn't his debt. It was Marcus's. Marcus owed money to some people, bad people, and Brandon had agreed to help him pay it off in exchange for a cut of the profits from selling my belongings. So Brandon hadn't been trying to save himself from dangerous people. He'd been helping his friend while simultaneously stealing from his wife so he could run away and start a new life. With all the evidence gathered, I hired the best divorce attorney in Atlanta. Her name was Patricia Morrison, and she had a reputation for absolutely destroying unfaithful spouses in court. "Oh, honey," she said when I showed her what we had, "we're going to take him for everything." We filed for divorce on a Tuesday. Brandon was served the papers at his office. According to our attorney, he'd gone white as a sheet when he read them. That evening, he showed up at my apartment. I'd changed the locks, but he pounded on the door. Nia, please, let me explain." I opened the door but left the chain on. "Explain what, Brandon? How you were planning to rob me and abandon me? How you were going to leave the state and start over with $70,000 of stolen money?" His face crumpled. "It wasn't like that. I have the bank records," I said calmly. "I have the emails. I have proof of every single item you sold. I know about Charlotte. I know about Marcus. I know everything." "Nia, please." "You told me I'd never know," I said, and my voice was ice. "You told Marcus I trusted you completely. Well, you were right. I did trust you. But you know what? I'm smarter than you gave me credit for." I closed the door in his face. The legal battle took 3 months. Brandon tried everything. He claimed the items were jointly owned, that he had every right to sell them. His lawyer argued that the prenup meant I couldn't claim the money he'd made because it was technically from his own labor. But Patricia Morrison was relentless. She brought the emails as evidence of intent to defraud. She brought testimony from the collector who was actually Marcus, and who, facing his own legal troubles, was more than happy to throw Brandon under the bus. She brought expert witnesses who valued each stolen item and proved that Brandon had sold them for far less than they were worth, costing me money. And then came the final blow. Patricia discovered that Brandon had used our joint credit card to buy his plane tickets to Charlotte. He'd charged them to our account and planned to disappear before I got the bill. The judge was not amused. In the end, I got everything: the house, the savings, the investments. And Brandon was ordered to pay me restitution for every item he'd sold, valued at their current market rate, not what he'd gotten for them. The total came to over $100,000. His lawyer tried to argue that Brandon didn't have that kind of money, but the judge pointed to the $70,000 sitting in his secret account and said he could start there. Marcus, meanwhile, was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. He lost his contracting license and his business. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat in Patricia's office and signed the final papers. I should have felt triumphant, and part of me did, but mostly, I just felt tired. "You did good, kid," Patricia said, handing me a pen. "You fought back, and you won." "I know," I said. "It just doesn't feel the way I thought it would." "It never does," she said gently. "But you stood up for yourself. You didn't let him get away with it. That's what matters." I sold the house 6 months later. Too many bad memories. I used the money to buy a smaller place in a different neighborhood, somewhere Brandon had never been. I replaced the items he'd stolen with new things that were mine alone. And I learned something important. Trust is everything in a relationship, but so is paying attention. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And if someone is willing to lie to you once, they'll do it again. Brandon tried to contact me a few times after everything was settled. Emails, texts, even a handwritten letter. He said he was sorry. He said he'd made a terrible mistake. He said he never meant to hurt me. I deleted every message without reading past the first line. He'd had his chance to be honest with me, and he'd chosen to lie instead. He'd chosen greed over loyalty, money over love. I ran into Jessica at a coffee shop about a year later. She asked how I was doing. "I'm good," I said, and I meant it. "I'm really good." "I'm glad," she said. "You deserved better than what he gave you." "I know," I said, "and I'm done settling for less." That night, I sat in my new living room, in my new house, surrounded by my new things, and I thought about how different my life looked now compared to a year ago, how much I'd lost, and how much I'd gained. I'd lost my marriage, my trust, my sense of security, but I'd gained something more important. I'd gained the knowledge that I could stand up for myself, that I could fight back, that I could survive something that should have broken me. And maybe that was the real lesson in all of this. Not that people will betray you, though they will. Not that you should never trust anyone, because you should. But that when someone shows you who they really are, you have to believe them. And when they try to take advantage of you, you have to be strong enough to fight back. I rebuilt my life piece by piece. New home, new routines, new friends, and eventually, when I was ready, new love. But that's another story. For now, I was just grateful. Grateful I'd checked those security cameras. Grateful I'd trusted my instincts. Grateful I'd had the courage to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it was. Because in the end, the truth is always better than a beautiful lie. Always.